welcome to the show. This is it. This be the big old podcast, the Hobnobbin with Slim Man podcast, where we have conversations with creative people on both sides of the show biz coitin'. Yeah. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. I hope everybody is fine and dandy out there in Slimland. We are coming to you today from the Slim Shack right here in Palm Springs, California, the town that Frank Sinatra put on the map. I am your host, the Slim Man, Slim Manicotti, Slim Papa, Showstopper. And in this episode of Hobnobbin, I'm going to have a chat with guitarist Peter White. We talked for about 2 hours. He's just an interesting and kind of philosophical guy. He's a Brit, a Londoner, and we had a really great conversation. But before we dig in deep, let me tell you Slimsational Slim people about what's been happening at Slim's Shady Trailer Park. Well, the Young at Heart CD and the ebook version of the Slim Man Cooks Cookbook will both be available as digital downloads this Friday, October the 20th. Mark your calendars. The cookbook will hopefully be up in all the old familiar places like Amazon and Barnes & Noble and all the online bookstores, and the Young at Heart CD will be available on iTunes and wherever else people buy digital music these days. What else? Oh, my harmonica came in the mail. I'm learning how to play harmonica. It's a Hohner Marine Band blues harmonica in the key of A. I took it out of the box and started to play it, and man, what an ugly sound. Listening to someone learn how to play an instrument can't be fun. I mean, my poor mom, she must have had to put up with all those bad notes and all that fumbling and bumbling around I did when I was starting out. But, playing the harmonica it's not so bad if you want to play like Bob Dylan, which means you play a bunch of notes at the same time while just breathing in and out. But to play single notes, that takes a lot of time. To bend notes and play the blues, that takes a lot of practice. So I started practicing, and after about 10 minutes, my mouth was so sore. I was using muscles that I don't normally use, and I had to stop. My face hurt, which reminds me of the old joke. Guy's been playing harmonica and stops and says, "My face hurts." And the guy next to him says, "It's killing me." So anyway, I can only play harmonica for about 10 minutes at a time, which is probably fine with anyone within earshot. What else? Oh, I went to a place near the Slim Shack the other night. It's called the Tack Room. It's right next to the Empire Polo Grounds, where they have all the polo matches, and it's also where they have the big Coachella Music Festival and the Stagecoach Music Festival. So the Tack Room has a mixed crowd, some locals, some horse people like jockeys and groomers and trainers. And when the festivals are in town, there are a lot of sound engineers and musicians and roadies and security people, those types of folks. There was a band playing outside on this past Friday night, a band called Faults of Andreas, and I know the lead singer, a guy named Jimmy Fitz, and they played some Tom Petty and some Neil Young, and Fitz has this real deep, like Johnny Cash type voice, and he sang all that Neil Young stuff way down low instead of singing it up high like Neil usually does. Anyway, it was a bit unusual, but it was pretty good there, Slim people. I was hanging out that night with my friend Benicio del Toro, not the real Benicio del Toro, just a guy that looks like him. Anyway, the concert at the Tack Room with the Faults of Andreas was a benefit for autism, and it was a beautiful night out here in Palm Springs, California. What else? Oh, I made some potluck pasta last night. No, this has nothing to do with pot, Slim people. Potluck pasta is when Uncle Slimmy looks in the fridge and makes a pasta sauce with whatever he can find. I had some frozen wild shrimp. I had some pasta, I had some broccoli, and I had some of the sweetest grape tomatoes that I've ever tasted. Oh, shoot, was this so nice? Anyway, here's what I did. I smashed about 6 large cloves of garlic. I smashed each clove with the broadside of a knife, peeled off the skin. Then I put some olive oil in a large sauté pan. I put it over medium heat. I added the garlic and some crushed red pepper, and I let the garlic sauté for a couple of minutes until it was pale gold. And then I turned each clove over and let it sauté on the other side until it was pale gold. Then I put in some broccoli florets, some broccoli tops cut into small pieces. I let them sauté until they were kind of withered. Then I added about a half cup of white wine, dry white wine, and I turned the heat to high. I let it come to a boil and let it cook down for a minute or two. Then I turned the heat back down to medium low. I added the shrimp, defrosted of course. I had rinsed them off and patted them dry with paper towels. And I let the shrimp cook with the broccoli just for a couple of minutes, then I flipped them over. I added a couple pads of butter, maybe a tablespoon or 2 chopped up, and then I added a little salt to the tops of the shrimp, and I let them cook for just a couple minutes. And then I added the grape tomatoes. So you see, you add the tomatoes last and you don't let them cook for long, because if you do, the skins come off the tomatoes and the tomatoes become mushy and they lose their form. You just want to heat up the tomatoes there, Slim people. That's it. So give it a gentle stir and take it off the heat. Now you can use this, as an appetizer, put it with bruschetta or serve it with some warm bread. I cooked it over pasta. Anyway, I cooked the pasta, drizzle it with a little olive oil, and toss the shrimp sauce on top and gave it all a gentle stir. And I found some toasted pine nuts in the fridge, some toasted pine nuts, and I sprinkled them on top. And oh, shoot, was it so nice. It was really, really good. I put the recipe up on the slimmancooks.com website, free for all slim people. Nice. All right, enough about the Slim Shack. Let's dig deep into my chat with guitarist Peter White. We had such a great conversation. We really did. We talked for about 2 hours, so I'll have to break this up into 2 parts. I'll play the first half of my chat this week, and I'll do the second half next week. There's lots of great stuff in here, Slim people. You're going to love it. Anyway, I was tempted to make some jokes, but I refrained. A good friend of mine said, you don't have to always go for the joke. So for instance, like when Peter mentioned the Al Stewart song, The Year of the Cat, I was going to make a joke about how Al Stewart stole that song from me, and my original title was The Year I Got Fat. But I just let it go. Anyway, there are still some funny parts in there. Peter is a charming and gracious guy, and we had a great little chat. So let's listen to my conversation with Peter White. Here we go. Hobnobbin with Slim Man and Peter White. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Slimmy.
Slimmy who?
Slimmy Bo Bimmy.
I was just playing a show with one of your friends, Marc Antoine.
Yeah, you just did the Thornton Winery, did you?
That's right. Last Saturday, it was fun getting together with a Frenchman. You never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And
so who was in the band?
I had Sergio Gonzalez on the drums, Ramon Islas. Wow, we have a whole Latino contingent here. Ramon Islas on the percussion, Roberto Valli on the bass.
Ooh.
And Greg Karoukas on the keyboard, from all the way from Greece. So we have a kind of world group, world music thing happening.
Yeah,
love playing with these guys. Baby.
Greg Karukas is from Maryland, my home state.
That's right.
Yes, he is. How did the show go?
It was great. I actually fell over at one point. I tripped over a monitor. You know, when I'm playing on stage, I'm not really conscious of, usual stuff like staying upright. I'm not thinking about that. So I kind of took a step back and fell backwards over a monitor, and the whole audience, you could hear them go, because I'm on my back. But I just kept, after a couple of moments, silence, because I was playing a solo piece and nothing to cover me, and I just started playing again while I was still on my back. Just
so
let
you
people know.
fell over on your back?
Yeah, and I just kept playing to show people that I was okay, because when you fall, you really shouldn't try to get up immediately, because you may have hurt yourself, and if you try to get up and you've hurt yourself, you may hurt yourself even more. So that's just a piece of advice for the folks out there. If you've fallen or you see someone else fall, don't try to pick them up immediately. You may hurt them even more. So just take a moment to make sure that everything's in the right place.
Now, when you fell over, was anybody over there to help you, or were they laughing, the guys in the band?
No, they were just shocked. I think they were just shocked. Like, did Peter have a heart attack? What's going on here?
Yeah. Well, did you have your little sandals on with no socks? Is this the reason why you fell over, or did you actually wear a normal pair of shoes?
No, I was wearing my sandals because God forbid I would ever have to do a job which I had to wear, where I had to wear shoes. If I had a job where I had to wear shoes, I don't think I could do it.
Now, why do you wear sandals? Is there some kind of health? Is there health reasons for not?
My feet. I never really wanted to talk about this, but here we go. I mean, you did ask. My feet are always warm. In fact, they're not just warm; they're hot. My feet are hot all the time. They're like hot dogs. I put shoes on. I find it very distracting because my feet get so hot that I can't concentrate on anything, because all I can think about is how hot my feet are. So this happened to me. It started right around when I was about 35, funnily enough. I never had any problem before that. All of a sudden, something happened with my metabolism. My feet started to get hot. And after a while of wearing, different kind of shoes, I started to realize I shouldn't be wearing shoes at all. If I wear sandals, even in winter, I'm out there in the snow. In fact, I was out there in the snow. I was playing in Salt Lake City in March. No, it was Park City, Utah. And snow on the ground. I was quite happily walking out there in the snow. Feet were quite comfortable. People think it's an affectation. People think I'm just being weird. It's a style thing. It's not. It's just comfort.
You got hot feet.
I got hot feet, and, I cannot sleep with my feet in the bed, for instance. My feet have to be outside of the bed. I'm not wearing shoes right now, because wearing shoes right now, any kind of shoes, even my sandals, are too hot for me right now.
I did it.
So if you see me wearing sandals in a show, which is probably 95% of the time, now you know. And I'm gearing up to do a Christmas show with Dave Cars later this year. And Dave said to me, well, Peter, are you going to wear the sandals? This is a Christmas show. I'm not sure that's going to be the right look. And I said, well, how about I'll compromise with you, Dave. I'll wear the socks, but I won't wear the shoes. And he said, that's a good compromise. And nobody, at a distance, nobody will really know that I'm not wearing shoes. It'll just be dark socks. It'll look fine. And I'll be quite happy.
I did a show with you at the International Smooth Jazz Awards in Toronto when it was snowing, and you actually did that show. It was a big television production, remember? And you did that show with a pair of regular shoes on, and I remember that show. You were up for a couple of awards that year in Toronto for the International Smooth Jazz Awards.
I remember that, and that was a lot of fun. And I remember that was where I met David Sanborn.
Really? It was the first time you met him?
I've met him in passing, but never to have a real conversation. And beckoned me to his dressing room and said, "Hey, Peter, come on, let's chat for a while. Let's chat." Never really chatted before. So I followed him to his dressing room. He sat around him, and the first thing he said to me says, "So you know Leslie Lee, right?" And I'm thinking, here we go. We're not talking about music. We're not talking about saxophone reeds. We're not talking about guitars. We're talking about girls. Nothing changes. And Leslie Lee was a former girlfriend of his who I knew through another friend of mine who also dated her way back. This is going back to the 70s. And I thought that was kind of fun that we had that common ground, that we both knew the same girl from way back. But, sometimes it takes that to break the ice, knowing someone in common.
Yeah. So you got your start. I just saw an old video of you with Al Stewart. It was the year of the cat. And
yes.
I saw a video, and it had mentioned that Peter White played piano. And I'm looking at the piano player, and he's got this big, huge head of hair, and he's playing an acoustic grand. I'm like, that doesn't look like Peter White. And then as the song went on, it kind of panned out. And then I saw you playing some kind of synthesizer string machine or something. So you were a secondary keyboard with Al Stewart?
I was the cleanup man. I don't know if that has a different connotation in different circles, but I joined Al playing piano. And the first tour I did with him was a tour of England when I was 20 years old playing the piano. And because he already had a guitar player, and actually he didn't even know I could play the guitar. He didn't care. He just needed someone to play piano. And I had kept up my piano studies throughout my teenage years. So I was okay as a piano player. So I played piano with him. Then he said, "We're going to go to America now. After doing this tour of England, we're going to America." I go, "Wow. That sounds great. I never even thought about going to America. I'm just a poor boy from a rural town in England. I'm going to be on a plane going to America." He says, "Yeah, but I'm going to make a bigger band. I'm going to bring another keyboard player who's going to play primarily piano." His name was Peter Wood. And then, but you can play all the other, like the electronic keyboards, synthesizer, electric piano, Hammond organ.
Wow.
So that's what I did. And later, Peter Wood left, and Peter Robinson joined our band, who's now quite an accomplished film composer. And he's the guy that you see in the video that you're talking about, I think, which was, I think, taken... I'm not sure where that was taken. There was one that was taken in London for a show called The Old Grey Whistle Test. But that was Peter Robinson, and I was playing second keyboards, which,
So you were playing second keyboard.
Synthesizer and stuff. And but I also played, by that time, around 1978, after I'd been playing with Al for a couple of years, he realized that I could play the guitar. So he started to have me play acoustic guitar on stage, because he always had an electric guitar player. He said, "But you can play acoustic guitar." In fact, one day he gave me a nylon string acoustic. He says, "This is the sound I want to hear from you, this nylon string guitar. I want to hear that on a song I'm recording called On the Border." And I hadn't really played nylon string guitar, and I didn't have a nylon string guitar, but he gave me his. So we went in the studio. This was the summer of 1975. I was just turning 21, and we recorded a song called On the Border, which became a staple of his live shows ever since, where I would play the nylon string guitar. Now, when we went on tour, I was still playing keyboards. But for that one song, I would come out front with my nylon string guitar and I'd play that song. And that's what people would remember. They didn't remember anything I played on the Hammond organ or on the electric piano. But they said, "You're the guy that came out and played that nylon string guitar, and it sounded great. You should do more of that." And that's how it started.
How did you get the gig with Al Stewart?
I was living at home with my mother. I was 19 years old. I just did a gig with a holiday resort band in the south of England, and that summer was over. That was the summer of 74. I came home. I'm now out of work, no job, no prospects, no nothing. But I've had the taste for being a professional musician. I already had a little taste of it. Now I wanted the real thing. So I started going for auditions in London. And I found these auditions by looking at the back pages of a music paper, which was called The Melody Maker.
I remember.
In England at that time. And I would go to the payphone because, Slimmy, we grew up without a phone. There was no phone in the house. I didn't, up till the age of 20, I never lived in a house with a telephone. So I would go to the payphone and I would call to London saying, I want to try out for this audition, for this band, or that band. And that's how I got started. I met a band called Principal Edward's Magic Theatre, which I knew about. I'd seen them play. And they asked me to join them. And they broke up subsequently about 3 weeks later. But within that time, I had moved down to London in a flat that they had. They had a kind of a communal flat apartment, as you say here. So now I was living in London for the first time. And for the first time, I was living in a house with a telephone. And that's very significant because one day the telephone rang. And this guy started talking to me and rambling about Al Stewart. And Al Stewart's looking for a keyboard player. And Al Stewart wants to go on tour. And I'm thinking, yeah, I know Al Stewart. I've seen Al Stewart play. I like his music. This guy turned out to be Al Stewart's manager. And he found my number through one of the other guys in the band that had just broken up, that I was part of. So, and I'm thinking, man, I think back now, and I could have been out. I could have been out shopping. I could have been visiting my mum. The phone would have just rang. Nobody would have answered it. And someone else would have probably got the gig, and I wouldn't be here today. But that one moment changed my life. The fact that I was actually home at that moment when the telephone rang. Because in those days, there were no answering machines. There were no cell phones, no answering services. This is 1975. So that was the moment that changed my life. And so I went to meet Al, played a few things on the piano, because that's what he wanted. He wanted someone to play piano. And he said, great, let's go to the pub. I said, do I have the gig?
That's it?
He says, sure. As far as I'm concerned, you got the gig. I said, great, let's go to the pub. That's how I started. That was how my life in music started as a touring musician. And I played with Al subsequently for 20 years.
Off and on?
That was my gig. No, that was pretty much on for 20 years.
Wow. Now,
pretty much that was my main gig. And towards the end of that, towards the last 5 years of that 20 years, I started recording my own music because I thought, it'd be nice to make my own album one day and maybe get a little bit of recognition, because I'm hearing my guitar playing on the radio sometimes and they never mention my name. So I can see what I have to do. I have to make an album and put my name on the front. As you know, that's the only way to get any recognition. So that's how I started. And I heard a group called Acoustic Alchemy from England, on the radio. There was a radio station in LA called The Wave, because by that time I was living in Los Angeles, because I'd moved there to keep my gig with Al Stewart, because that's where he decided that he wanted to base out of. So I just kind of followed on just to keep my gig. I ended up in LA, which turned out to be just the perfect place for me to actually start my own solo career. I met all the right people, and that's how I came to record my first album, which came out in 1990. I was already 35, I think, I was 35 when that album came out.
And what was that first album called?
Well, it's difficult to pronounce because it's in French, Slim.
Yes. I took
it's
6
called
years.
Réveillez-vous.
Réveillez-vous.
Réveillez-vous, which means wake up.
So
it was kind of like my awakening, and also it's a nod to my mother, who is French.
So your mother
actually
was born in France?
My mother was French. My mother passed away. Yeah, you see, because when you're in America, you have to explain that when you say that somebody's French, they actually are born in France, because in America it means something different.
Yes.
You can say you're Italian, you can say you're Greek, but that doesn't mean that you were born there. It just means that you have heritage.
Ancestors, right.
But my mother actually was born in France. Yes.
Did that have an influence on you as, with music? Do you know what I mean? Like, because it just seems to me, and this is strange, France and England are obviously very close. Just a channel of water, a small channel of water separates those two countries, right? Now you have England and the UK that has come out with some of the absolute best pop music in the history of the world. Some of the most soulful singers. For years and years and years, it has happened like that. For some reason, the UK has dominated the pop charts. Name one French pop star besides Charles Aznavour or Edith Piaf.
Johnny Hallyday.
I mean, why do you think that is?
You're right. You're actually that's a good point. That's a very good point. Why is it that the English, basically in the 60s, copying the American singers like Elvis Presley and Little Richard and the Beatles certainly did. They idolized Little Richard and Elvis Presley and it's kind of revamped it. But I don't know why this happened in England and not in France. Maybe it's a language barrier.
I don't know.
Because in France, they don't really speak English in France. Not like if you go to Germany, for instance, pretty much everybody in Germany speaks English, but not so in France. Maybe there was a language barrier. And rock and roll really is, American English. That's the language of rock and roll, which is why English people sometimes sing with an American accent.
That's true.
It's just kind of it's traditional.
So did your mom have an influence on you in terms of, the direction of your music? Did she encourage you in your studies? Was she
Actually, my mum did not. My dad certainly did. My dad was English. But it was my dad that started me playing the piano. He gave me my first guitar. He encouraged me to play many other instruments, which he would bring into the house. He'd come home with the clarinet one day. I said, try this. Or trombone, I remember one day. He encouraged me to take harmonica lessons, which I still play to this day. I'm kind of trying to reintroduce that into my music. My mum she wasn't really musical, or she never showed any interest that much in music, except listening to Charles Aznavour.
That's me playing harmonica. Anyway, and now a word from our sponsors. I've never made homemade pasta, not once. I might learn one day when I decide to make ravioli or tortellini or one of those stuffed pastas, but why make your own pasta when you've got Di Cecco? It's the pasta I've used for the past 100 years or so. It's available in most grocery stores. I use the farfalle a lot when I make pesto. I use the penne rigate when I make my tomato sauce. I use the Di Cecco rigatoni when I make my bolognese sauce. And I use Di Cecco spaghetti when I make my shrimp sauce. I really like Di Cecco. It's consistent and it's delicioso, especially when it's al dente. So, do yourself a favor, check out Di Cecco pasta next time you're in the store. It's in the light blue box with the Italian farmer gal on the cover. Di Cecco pasta. She's so nice. Are you looking to buy or sell a home in the Palm Springs area? Well, are you? Starting to cool down a bit out here. It's getting lovely. And if you want to buy or sell a home, I suggest you reach out to Cindy Guzay. She's with Berkshire Hathaway. They're a pretty good company, huh? And she's been living in the Palm Springs area for the past 20 years or so. She knows the real estate market like nobody else. She's got years of experience, and she's the go-to gal if you're looking for a condo or a house or even a vacation home. So no matter what your real estate needs are, you need to reach out to Cindy Guzay. Give her a call, 760-485-2505, or send her an email at cindy.guzay@outlook.com. That's 760-485-2505 or cindy.guzay, G-U-S as in Sam, E, at outlook.com. Another one of our sponsors here at Hobnobbin with Slim Man is the Foundation for International Aid to Animals, helping animals by helping people care for them. The FIAA is a nonprofit family foundation based right here in the old USA. The FIAA has pioneered sterilization and treatment programs for homeless and sheltered dogs, and it also helps people with limited resources treat and care for their pets. So check out their website, aidtoanimals.org. You can find out all about the great work they're doing for abused and neglected animals all around the world. They've funded documentaries to bring attention to the problems of homeless and unprotected animals, and it's a real inspiration to see an organization that cares so much, that does so much to help. And if you get inspired, Slim people, there's a donate button. That's aidtoanimals.org. All right, let's get back to my conversation with guitarist Peter White. How many siblings do you have?
I have three. I have two brothers and a sister.
Are they musical?
They all kind of went into music. My younger brother Danny is the only other sibling of mine that went into professional music, and he became a band leader for a lady called Basia. In the 80s, and that came out of a band that they both formed called Matt Bianco.
So Matt Bianco, Danny White was in Matt Bianco. Now, was Bianco?
Well, what do you think? What do you think? Bianco means white.
Yes. So that's where the name
that's the connection
came from.
That was that was kind of that was Danny's nickname. Where they used to call him Danny Bianco, and then they said, well, let's came up with a name for the band, but they couldn't call it Danny Bianco after him, so they just made up a fictional character called Matt Bianco.
And so
who was supposed to be some kind of a spy, like a
gangster.
James Bond type of. No, not really gangster, like a secret agent, let's say.
Okay. So
and the first album is called "Whose Side Are You On?" Even it's all about double. Double. What do you call it?
Double agents, double entendres.
Yes, double agent.
Double trouble.
Whose side are you on? Are you really on my side, or are you on their side? So that's how he got his start in music, Danny. And I remember him saying, I think he got his start by watching me on the TV, and he may have even been referring to the same video that you saw recently of me playing on an English TV show called The Old Grey Whistle Test.
I saw
with
that.
Al Stewart.
Yeah.
And Danny saw that and he says, well, my brother's on the television. Well, I can do this. So he started practicing the piano a whole lot, and he got really good. And subsequently, we did many tours together, actually, with Basia. Always a lot of fun.
So you play guitar in Basia's band after Danny White started the band, kind of set up the band around her?
Yeah, because they did one album as Matt Bianco, with a guy singer called Mark Riley. And then that band kind of broke up. And Mark, who was the original male singer in the band, kind of continued with a different Matt Bianco. And Danny and Basia went to make another record deal. But because Danny was already signed from his original deal to Warner Brothers, I think, Warner Brothers Recording, Basia was not ever signed to the band Matt Bianco, so she was free to sign a new deal. So she became a solo artist, and Danny remained as her musical director and producer, co-producer. And then he would bring me in to play on all their recordings. I think three albums I did.
What instruments were you playing with Basia?
I was playing guitar because my brother covered all the piano on all the keyboard parts. So I was playing electric and nylon string guitar with her. And then we went on tour, and I would be playing guitar, and my brother would be playing piano. And so it was a kind of a nice family thing going on there.
She was really big there for a while. I mean, she was on Letterman, and she was all over the charts. And
she was the late 80s. She was huge on what we now call smooth jazz radio. She was huge. Yeah, it sold millions of albums.
Yeah,
and we played really big places. I remember played Merriweather Post Pavilion a few times.
Yeah, I've been
we
there
played
many times.
We played the Greek Theater here in LA a few times.
Did you
and
did you know her manager, D. Anthony?
I knew him. I didn't really know him that much, but I mean, I met him. Obviously, he became their manager for the last tour that I did with them.
Yeah,
he had become their manager.
He was a pretty big.
He was a legendary figure. Yeah. Look him up. He managed Peter Frampton. Frampton Comes Alive. Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
Jay Giles.
10 years after.
Yeah, and his daughter was, I don't know, head of Sony or Epic or one of those things.
Yes.
One of those large labels. Yeah, D. Anthony was a big deal in the music business, and he used to manage a friend of mine, got him a deal on Epic Records. But yeah, D. Anthony, I remember meeting him, and he was quite a legend in the business. Now, do you...
And he also told me, when I met him, he says, you know me, he says, you ever seen the movie Woodstock? I go, yeah. He said, you remember at the end of 10 years after their song, somebody throws a watermelon on stage. I don't know where this watermelon came from, but he says, and there's a guy that comes up on stage, scoops up the watermelon and runs off with it, and that was me, he says. So he's in the movie Woodstock.
He's the watermelon man.
The Watermelon Man, yeah. Watermelon Man.
Yeah. So you get done with Basia, and is that when you started your solo career?
Well, when I did my first really big tour with Basia was 1990, which was the same time that my first album came out. So I would use that opportunity to, every city that we went to on tour, I would go to the radio station, and the first thing they said to me was, well, let's do an interview on the air, Peter, but first of all, I got to ask you, where's Basia? They only invited me to visit them because they thought I would bring her along.
Right.
Because as you say, she was huge at that time.
She was.
Selling millions of albums. So, but I said, I'm sorry, I didn't bring Basia, but, I've got an album that just came out. So I could talk about that. And during the show, during her live show, I would play one of my songs in the show with my brother, Danny, while she took a costume change break. So that was and there's still people that come up to me now and remember me from that show.
Are you still in contact with Basia?
Yeah, I don't see her very often, and she doesn't tour that much anymore.
Yeah, I saw a video from like 10 years ago.
I know her and my brother are still writing music, and they're working on an album right now, which I played on.
Really?
I played on just about all her albums, and it should be coming out next year.
So piano was your first instrument, guitar was your second instrument?
I don't really remember, Slim, but it was probably that way. I remember my dad brought a piano when I was very young, and my mother famously said later, he bought a piano and we had no furniture. But he bought the piano, and I'm glad he did, because I just started banging out chords, and I thought it was really fun. And the guitar probably came a year or two later. Don't exactly remember, but this is all before the age of 10. But interestingly enough, I was given instruction on the piano and many other instruments, the clarinet, violin at school. As I said, I played the trombone in a brass band for a while. I was given instruction on all these instruments, except never for the guitar. I never had a lesson. My dad bought me the guitar one day. I don't even remember if I asked for a guitar. We're going back so far. I must have been 7 or 8. And it just sat there. I didn't know what to do with it. What am I going to do with this? And I just one day started plucking the bottom string, and boom, 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 boom. I thought, well, that sounds pretty cool. And that's how I got started. I just figured it out by myself.
So you've never had a guitar lesson, but you've had a lot of other music lessons on other instruments.
Yeah, I've had a lot of other music lessons. My dad taught me to read music. I had music education at school. I'm a bit ashamed to say I gave it up as soon as I could. I don't recommend this, by the way, but I was more interested in math and science than in what anyone could teach me about music. I honestly felt that there was nothing they could teach me about music that I couldn't figure out by listening. That's how I'd always learned, by listening. And I'm still not sure I was wrong, by the way. And
no,
45 years later,
I agree.
I'm not sure I was wrong.
I agree, and I'll tell you why I agree. Music is, first of all, heard. The only reason why they started writing it is because they had no way to record it. In other words, if they had recording machines back in the 1700s, Mozart would never have written a note of music. He would have just played it into some recording device and said, here you go, here's what I want it to sound like. Reading music is a tough thing, and it just seems kind of backwards to me. I always thought it should go the other way around. Like when I was studying music, when I was studying classical piano, they'd give me like the Moonlight Sonata. I'd look at the music and go, what the... But then I'd go get the record or the CD and I'd listen to it, and then I'd look at the music and go, oh, that's what it is. So, it is kind of backwards to learn how to read when all you're really trying to do is get people to listen.
Well, I just had a conversation with somebody about this just today, and they said, well, when you improvise, are you thinking about the next note? When you're playing one note, you're thinking about another note? I'm going... But listen to whether you're talking to me. You're speaking an entire sentence to me, but it's not written out. You didn't plan this sentence. You didn't know what the last word of the sentence was going to be when you started the first word. One word follows from another. So it's exactly the same with music. It's just another language. You can learn music by listening, which is how you learn your mother tongue. By listening. Nobody gives you a book when you're 1 year old and says, read this. That will come later. You learn to read, you learn to speak by imitating what you hear. And that's exactly how I learned to play the guitar, by listening to what I heard on the radio. And I figured, here, what's this chord that I keep hearing? Oh, later I realized, that's called a major 7th chord. According to music theory, I knew the chord because of the way it sounded, and I could then sit down at the piano and I could play it. But I didn't know the name of it. I still don't know what a flat 13 is. I have to literally count the notes, 8, 9, 10,
and a half,
to figure it out. But I know the sound of it, and I know it means something to me, and I can reproduce it at any moment when I feel that's the right chord to play, not because it's written down. And I was just, I mentioned that I played some shows with Mark Antoine, and somebody said to me after the show, wow, when Mark plays your songs, he's looking at a chart. I'm going, well, yeah, that's how he likes to learn a song. He said, but when you're playing his music, you don't look at any chart. I said, well, I can't. For a start, I find it terribly distracting to have a chart on stage with me. It doesn't help me. It just becomes a distraction. So I'd rather just listen to the music and just follow by listening. And I learn by listening too. If I have to learn somebody else's song, I just play it over and over again until it's fixed in my head.
Yeah.
And then once it's in my head, I can now play it. I can replay it from my head, and my hands fall into the right position, because that's how I've always played. That's how I've always learned music.
You know,
and, somebody wrote to me the other day, because my email address is on my website, by the way. Someone wrote to me and says, I want to learn to play just like you. Why don't you send me the tablature for this particular song you've recorded? And I wrote back and said, well, for a start, I don't know tablature. I've seen it, and I can kind of figure it out if given enough time, but that's not how I read music. And if you want to learn to play the guitar like I learned to play the guitar, I'm not going to tell you where to put your fingers. You're going to listen, because that's how I learned. Nobody showed me this is where you put your fingers. I figured it out. There's only so many ways you can play a note on the guitar. If you hear somebody play a note on the radio, there's only so many ways to play that note, and you figure it out.
And you think about guys who play guitar, like for instance, Jimi Hendrix. He played a right-handed guitar, left-handed, upside down. Now, if he had gone to a teacher who would say, look, you're doing it all wrong, we might have lost.
Well, yeah, they would have.
We might, right. We might have lost one of the most innovative guitar players ever. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
For somebody to teach you how to play, if you're Jimi Hendrix playing a right-handed guitar, left-handed, upside down, they would go, you're doing it all wrong, kid.
And by the way, they would have also told Django Reinhardt, hey man, you've only got 2 fingers on your left hand. You may as well give up now. You're never going to be able to play the guitar. And yet he became one of the most innovative guitarists in jazz ever.
And the same thing could be said for a guy like Louis Armstrong. If he's singing like that and went to a vocal coach, they would say, oh, you're too gruff. You'll never be able to sing. You're going to lose your voice. And if he had had any instruction on how to breathe and how to do all that stuff, we wouldn't have heard Louis Armstrong as we hear him today, because a vocal coach would have taken everything that's unique about his voice and gotten rid of it, because it wasn't it wasn't the way that most people did it. It wasn't the way that hardly anybody did it.
That's absolutely right.
Yes, I am absolutely right.
You are right most of the time, Slim.
Yes, I am.
I must say.
There you have it. That was the first half of my chat with guitarist Peter White. We're going to listen to the second half and the third half next week. Anyway, Peter's a charming guy, huh? And he puts a lot of thought into what he does and into what he says. He's a thoughtful guy. And I was really glad we had a chance to go as long as we did. So anyway, Peter told me that he had written a song called Just Another Day, and Basia the singer, sang it. Well, now I, the Slim Man, Slim Papa, Showstopper, I also wrote a song called Just Another Day. But it sounds nothing like Peter White's song, thank goodness. There could be some copyright infringement there if it did. Anyway, so a few days ago, I was looking up my version of Just Another Day, and there's a version on the Solstice CD, but the version that I found that I really like is the version on the Slim Man Live CD. Wow, it sounded really good. It's me on bass and vocals, Johnny Cole on drums, Mambo Hernandez on percussion, and George Hazelrig plays the Fender Rhodes. And I'm telling you, he plays such a cool solo. He plays so well. Giorgio, he is so good. He's just so nice. So anyway, here we go. Here's a song called Just Another Day.
Just another day, watch the morning rain fall like teardrops from the sky. I just can't forget the first night we met. I can't get you off my mind. Wonder when I'm gonna see you. I wonder when I'm gonna see your face again. Just another night when I close my eyes, all I think about is you. I toss and turn in bed, the visions in my head of a love so strong and true. Morning comes and time is crawling, then I hear you knock upon my door. And then suddenly, it's a brighter day. And then suddenly, in your arms again. And then suddenly, the world is not so cold. And then suddenly, I'm in your arms again. Just another day, watch the morning rain fall like teardrops from the sky. I just can't forget the first night we met. I can't get you off my mind. Evening comes and time is crawling, then I hear your knock upon my door. And then suddenly, it's a brighter day. And then suddenly, in your arms again. And then suddenly, the world is not so cold. And then suddenly, in your arms again. And then suddenly, it's a brighter day. And then suddenly, in your arms again. And suddenly, the world is not so cold. And then suddenly, in your arms again. Just another day, just another day. Just another day, just another day, it's another day.
George Hazelwig on the piano.